Martin woke up to a tablet notification, an urgent meeting request from the name he had tried to forget since the day he left in silence, carrying a box in his hands. Alan Brooks. 9 years after firing him without warning, now he was the one begging for a conversation. At the time, Martin didn't get a chance to argue. He left without a scene, carrying his belongings in silence. No one imagined that the quiet engineer was about to change the entire industry. Today, Martin is the CEO of one of the world's largest auditory tech companies, and Alan, unaware, has just scheduled a meeting with the man who bought the very company he once ran into the ground. The meeting has a date and time, but nothing can prepare him for what's about to unfold. Martin was 29 when he was let go from the company where he believed he was building a solid career. A dedicated engineer, always punctual and efficient, but rarely included in key decisions. Few knew he had a hearing disability, and most didn't care. The dismissal came by email, on a regular day, like just another bureaucratic notice. No meeting, no farewell. Just one phrase: team restructuring. He closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and left the office carrying only what was his. No explicit outrage, no tears, but something inside him was beginning to shift. In the months that followed, Martin dove into a personal project that had only existed in scattered notebooks and ideas. He started designing devices that would facilitate sensory and auditory communication in urban environments. He wanted to create real solutions for problems the market ignored. With what little money he had, he rented a small room and gathered 3 trusted friends. None of them had business backgrounds, but they all knew what it was like to go unheard, and that was enough to start. In the first year, they faced technical failures, sleepless nights, and rejected proposals. The smell of reheated coffee mixed with the sound of typing and the silence of restrained frustration. But they also won over their first users, people who saw in those technologies a way to feel included. Gradually, the startup gained structure, purpose, and direction. Martin didn't look back. He never spoke of the firing or the old company, but the memory of that imposed silence still lingered, like an invisible frequency at the core of everything he was building. The second product launched by Martin's startup was a game changer in the field of auditory accessibility. Small, portable, and with embedded sensory intelligence, the device converted ambient sounds into personalized tactile signals. It boosted autonomy for thousands of people who had long been sidelined in public spaces. Soon, the company gained recognition at tech and inclusion conferences. Articles in specialized magazines started calling Martin the architect of functional silence. But he avoided the spotlight, preferring to let the results speak. Meanwhile, Alan Brooks struggled to keep his company relevant in an increasingly demanding market. After years of leading with arrogance and hasty decisions, he now faced a slow but steady decline. The numbers were still high, but the direction was unmistakable. The system developed by his company, once standard in schools and public offices, began to be replaced by more practical and empathetic solutions, created by none other than Martin's company. The lost bids were labeled strategic exceptions by the board, but Alan already knew he was losing ground. Tensions rose when Martin's firm won an international contract to supply auditory technologies to a hospital network. The direct competitor? Alan's old company, which had dominated that market for nearly a decade. It was a public and symbolic blow. From that point on, Alan's investors began pulling back. Staff cuts, leadership shakeups, and failed mergers became routine. Confidence evaporated, and quarterly reports now came with warnings. Meanwhile, Martin moved forward with a lean team and clear focus. His company grew sustainably, with consistent investments and near-unanimous sector approval. He didn't talk about competition, he talked about purpose. The final blow came with a reputation crisis. A clerical error exposed unethical internal practices at Alan's firm, involving suppliers and silent contracts. The scandal tanked stock values and forced the board to act swiftly. The sale was inevitable. A group of investors acquired the majority stake within weeks. The lead name behind the consortium was only revealed at the signing: Martin Hale. And just like that, the roles reversed. No fanfare, no revenge. The next day, a recurring image flooded newspapers and internal networks. Alan, eyes downcast, watching the announcement of the sale. For many, it was just another transition. But for him, it was the foreshadowing of something he couldn't quite name. Perhaps justice? Perhaps consequence. The executive meeting was scheduled to officially introduce the new leadership. All directors were present, anxiously awaiting the name behind the acquisition. When Martin entered the room, punctual and composed, most didn't recognize him at first, but Alan froze. It was a brief yet revealing moment. His expression flickered between disbelief and shame. The image of the man he had dismissed years ago now stood as the company's new owner. There was no escape. Martin greeted the room with a sober nod and stated he would speak with Alan privately in the coming days. There was no provocation or superiority in his demeanor, just a clear focus on executing the plan already in place. 2 days later, they met in a temporary office outside the main headquarters. The setting was neutral, with simple furniture and a view of a quiet garden. Alan arrived with a notebook in hand, trying to appear prepared. He began speaking before even sitting down, said he hadn't known who Martin truly was, that he had followed the board's guidance, that it was never personal. He tried, somehow, to rewrite the past, or at least soften it. Martin listened in silence. No rush, no visible reaction. He simply let the words run dry on their own. When Alan finished, Martin leaned forward slightly and spoke clearly. He said he wasn't there to demand anything or punish anyone, that the past couldn't be undone, but the future could be rebuilt with responsibility. That when his voice was taken away, he learned to listen to what the world truly needs. And that rebuilding wasn't about removing people, but redefining roles based on truth. Then he presented the offer: a subordinate, technical, operational role. Nothing symbolic, nothing punitive, just appropriate. A real position where Alan could contribute with what he still knew, without jeopardizing what the company was becoming. Alan read the document in silence. He recognized every term, every clause. It wasn't humiliation. It was, for the first time, a mirror. He signed it. As he left the room, he didn't feel anger. He felt, perhaps for the first time, a strange sense of justice. He was exactly where he needed to be, and somehow that felt right. Over time, the old company was fully absorbed. It got a new name, a new mission, and began operating under the principles Martin had built from the first day of his startup. There were no motivational slogans, just visible, quiet results. Alan embraced his new role without protest. He showed up on time, joined technical meetings, and submitted reports on schedule. He became just another employee in the organization, one name among many. Martin rarely interacted with him directly. There was no need. Their relationship was professional, marked by respectful distance. Neither mentioned the past. The old headquarters of Alan's company was shut down. Part of the physical archive was donated to an educational initiative. The offices, once filled with rushed decisions, gave way to inclusive research labs. It was the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. Martin continued leading the company with the same demeanor as always, reserved, precise, silent. He kept turning down interviews, awards, or honors. He preferred working behind the scenes, letting impact speak louder than any speech. One day, Alan crossed paths with Martin in the hallway of a newly opened innovation center. He gave a reserved nod, followed by a barely audible "thank you." Martin replied with a calm glance, the kind of response that says everything without needing to explain a thing. In Martin's office, there were few personal items, but among the discrete objects, there was a framed quote: "Some paths open at the very spot where someone once tried to shut the door." It wasn't a reminder of what he overcame, but of what he built despite it. Some stories don't end in revenge. They just settle over time until they find their place. And when that happens, silence stops being absence and becomes balance. If this story stirred something in you, keep walking with us. The next one is already on its way and might bring exactly what you didn't know you needed to hear.